that war was based upon a complete and total fabrication, a complete and total lie that was told to the American public with incredibly negative consequences.
Many of us thought the war was a mistake to begin with. Large percentages of the public now, in retrospect, think the war was a mistake. Even if you poll our veterans who have fought in the war, the vast majority of our veterans actually think it was a mistake.
We know that they lied, and the whole premise of the war was a big lie.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was in Congress in 1991, and we had a robust debate around the need to give President Bush the authority to remove Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. He received that authority. We removed Saddam from Kuwait. That's 30 years ago. It's ancient political history. So that 1991 authorization just has to go. I was in Congress in 2002 when we debated the authorization for use of military force in Iraq. Of course, we know that the war ultimately was fought on a lie that President Bush and Dick Cheney, his entire administration, made, which was that there were nuclear weapons in Iraq. They knew there were not, that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We know that they lied, and the whole premise of the war was a big lie, that we were going in to remove nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction from that country. So it's time for that authorization to go, as Senator Kaine has said, and others. We are now in a completely different posture with the Iraq government. We're no longer at war with them. And again, that war was based upon a complete and total fabrication, a complete and total lie that was told to the American public with incredibly negative consequences for so many tens of thousands of families across our country and families in the country of Iraq as well. So we have to move on, I think, to the conversation about where we are today. And one of the questions I'd like to ask is that I welcome the Biden administration's announced decision in February to end its support for offensive operations by the Saudi-led military coalition in Yemen, and for its commitment to a political solution that ends a 6-year civil war that has the tragic distinction of being the largest humanitarian emergency on the planet. However, the United States government is continuing to support the Saudi forces responsible for immense human suffering in Yemen.
I wholeheartedly support the public and official ending of the Iraq War. Many of us thought the war was a mistake to begin with. Large percentages of the public now, in retrospect, think the war was a mistake. Even if you poll our veterans who have fought in the war, the vast majority of our veterans actually think it was a mistake. So publicly ending the Iraq War, which has been over for a decade, is a great idea and shouldn't be controversial. But people who want to keep it in place have to realize that this vote will be similar to the vote in 2002. The vote in 2002 allowed 100,000 troops or more to be in Iraq. It allowed 2,000 of our soldiers to die. It allowed 20,000 people to be wounded. It allowed over 1,000 young men and women to lose their arms and legs. That's what you're voting for now. If you leave this in place, any president could do the same thing they did in 2002. That's what you're voting for. Wouldn't you want to vote again? People say we might not vote for it. That would be good if we didn't vote for another Iraq war. But if there is another need for a war, come and vote. When we have been attacked, we have voted overwhelmingly. When we were attacked on 9/11, we overwhelmingly voted. Iraq was a different story, and still people have debates over whether it was a good idea to this day. But leaving it on the books, if you vote to leave it on the books, you're voting to allow a president to send as much as hundreds of thousands of troops in. Now, this is debate over what you can do under Article 2 authority. I personally think it'd be much more narrow than any recent president has interpreted it to be. But every president has interpreted it to be wide open, and the only way we stop them, the only way we can possibly stop them is by defunding something they do, and we're unlikely to do that. But I don't think any president believes they can take 100,000 troops into Iraq or into any country without an authorization of force. So getting rid of this gets rid of the possibility of a big war by any president, I think. I don't think any president would attempt to do that without this in place. So we get rid of the possibility of a big war. That's what we're voting against. All the little things, not always little, but all of the military actions that presidents take, they will continue to take without any authorization. With regard to 2001, there is a danger, and this is where I disagree with many who want to replace it. Absolutely, we should repeal it. People say, oh, we want to make it more narrow. It's extremely narrow. It authorized us to go after those who planned, authorized, committed, and aided the terrorist attacks on one day, September 11th. It's been interpreted to be associated forces, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. There's no one left alive that has anything to do with 9/11. So it is very narrow. It doesn't apply to anything we're doing around the world as we speak, but it has been overly broad and overly broadly interpreted. So we should repeal it also. We shouldn't have 1,000 troops in Mali. We shouldn't have 1,000 troops in Somalia. We shouldn't be in 14 different countries. But if we replace it, all of the replacements of 2001 authorization have been still broad enough to be interpreted to include all the places we're involved with. Dozens of wars could be fought with most of the replacement bills. So I'd say repeal them all. War is supposed to be something that's difficult to get involved with. Come before us. We just give up our power by having any AUMF on the books. They all should be repealed. And if people want to go to war, which is a terrible thing, come and vote. When we've been attacked, we will vote to go to war. But we're reluctant to, and good. That should be a good thing that we shouldn't. Is it likely we'd vote to go to war in Mali or Somalia tomorrow? We'd probably vote against it, and that would be a good thing. That's also why we shouldn't be there now. But I caution those who want to replace it that replacing 2001, most of the efforts, while well-intended, I think were as broad or broader than the actual language. The language is actually very narrow in 2001, but has been overly interpreted. So I think it's important that the American people know that this is a vote about a war that's long been over, but a vote to keep this is really a vote to allow something as big as the Iraq War was at its maximum. That's what this is about. If you want that kind of power on the books and you don't want to vote again, you know, if a brand new threat comes up, you don't want to have the power to determine for your constituents whether we go to war or not. That is giving up a huge amount of power that our founding fathers thought should always be vested in Congress. That's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Krause, the United States maintains contracts with the Saudi Royal Air Force to maintain its fighter aircraft. How does the administration make the distinction between supporting offensive and defensive operations when we know that the Saudi Air Force is carrying out strikes in Yemen using U.S.-maintained fighter aircraft?
Senator, as you say, our armed forces are providing advice and limited information for defensive and training purposes only in connection with that conflict. And we're always very mindful of legislative mandates and restrictions to make sure that as we provide assistance to our partners, that we make sure that the law of armed conflict, is appropriately complied with.
Well, let me ask you this question: in Oman, I know that the Biden administration is attempting to get the Houthis and the government of Yemen to return to the negotiating table. What leverage does the United States and its partners have to urge the Houthis to end its military offensive and return to diplomatic talks?
Senator, as you note, the president took a step to end the support to Saudi-led coalition forces' offensive actions, to basically say it is time to bring this war to an end, given the devastating humanitarian impact that you noted. We do continue to believe a political solution is the only way to resolve this and lessen the humanitarian crisis. We have urged countries like Oman, that has relations with the Houthis, to put pressure on them to, in fact, come to the table. I was just in Oman on my latest around-the-world travels and encourage them to do just that. We have an envoy, Tim Lenderking, who is just nonstop in his going to those countries who can affect all the parties here to try to reach a political resolution, which is the only way out of this nightmare.
And what success are we having in getting Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates to pay their fair share to take care of this humanitarian crisis in Yemen.
There is an ongoing effort to do that with some success, but quite frankly, Senator, the real answer to this is the one that you were implying, and that is to have a political resolution and bring any conflict to an end.
It's much easier to start a war than to end a war. I've been trying for over 10 years to bring an official end to the Iraq War. In 2011, I forced a vote on this. In 2013, I reintroduced it. In 2016, I reintroduced it. And as recently as 2017, I lost every time. I'm hoping I'll be on the winning side this time. But I think it's a win for the American people, and I don't accept that it's meaningless. I don't think it changes what a president does in immediate, sort of short-lived military actions. I think presidents will do what they're going to do in those cases. But this authorization authorized 170,000 people to go to Iraq, a big, large land war. That's still on the books. If it authorized it once, it would authorize it again. So I think the vote today is not meaningless and symbolic. It is to say that we do not give any president, Republican or Democrat, permission for a large land-scale land war in Iraq. We're taking away that permission. If you want to go back, come before the people. It's a big, important vote. We all say it's the most important vote. Well, let's take it back and make it part of the Senate. So I applaud the efforts of all those involved with this, and I'm a wholehearted yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Paul. As someone who voted against the Iraq War in 2002, I totally agree with you, Senator.